We're Howard and Caitlin of the New State Nomads, and this year we're planning to visit 51 U.S. national parks in 52 weeks.
And in this episode, we're going to share with you how we planned this incredible adventure and some tips and tricks to help you make the most out of visiting your national parks.
We're traveling right now in a 2023 Winnebago Vista National Park Foundation Limited Edition. But regardless of what RV you're traveling in, these tips and tricks will definitely be beneficial to you as you plan your own adventure.
And whether you're super ambitious like us and want to visit as many national parks as you can, or if you're visiting a couple in a certain region, there are certainly factors that you'll want to consider. The biggest one is probably weather and time of year, and then how much time you can actually spend at each park. And then you'll definitely want to do your research about the must-see things to do in each park. And all of this will help you maximize your route.
So let's talk about weather and seasonality. A lot of parks have specific windows of time where they're fully open, where the campgrounds are open, where there isn't snow blocking roads. So you do need to do your research. In our situation, we tried to do essentially like a clockwise direction starting in the southeast because that made the most sense regarding the weather at a given location.
The very first park we visited in our tour was Everglades National Park, and so we have visited now twice, once in the winter and once in early spring. And those are great times to go because the wildlife is really active and there are the most amount of ranger-led programs going on.
Another example is Acadia National Park, and it's most popular in the fall because of the leaves changing colors. Well, if you're not really into that, maybe consider going in the late spring, early summer because crowds will be lower. Now, if you absolutely have to be there in the fall to see those leaves changing into oranges and purples and browns, well, then you're going to need to make way in advance planning regarding your campground reservations and also making reservations for Cadillac Mountain because you also need a reservation in order to even drive up to the top of Acadia National Park.
And that brings us to Recreation.gov. This is going to be the hub for all of those reservations. Camping, some like Glacier National Park, you have to have a ticket to even access the main part of the road. So go on to Recreation.gov as soon as you know the dates that you want to visit and start plugging those in and see what availability there is.
And speaking of dates and times, you're going to want to set some calendar reminders for yourself because it's way easier if you set those in advance so that way you know that in 4 months' time you're going to need to start planning the campground reservations and getting your Glacier National Park reservation for the Going to the Sun Road.
And if you go on and check for a campground reservation for a site that you really were hoping to get and it is sold out, don't be completely disheartened. There are a lot of resources that you can use that will check for cancellations, and one of my personal favorites is campnav.com. You can go in and set alerts for specific campgrounds within national parks with the dates that you want for a certain amount of nights, and then you'll get a text if there's a cancellation or an opening. That is how we've been able to score some great camping last minute. I would highly recommend that.
Another tip is to research the campsites because certain areas of campgrounds, maybe they don't allow generator usage at all. Maybe there's only specific times for generators. That's if they don't have hookups. Very few campgrounds inside of national parks have electric hookups or water hookups at the individual campsites. If that's important for you, you might want to also consider looking outside of the national parks and look at close by private campgrounds, even state campgrounds, because sometimes adjacent to a big national park is going to be a campground that has full hookups available if that's something that you're looking for.
And if you aren't lucky in scoring camping inside the national park, make sure you check the National Forest Land or BLM land that oftentimes surrounds the national park. There could be options for free camping too.
Some of the most amazing camping that we've had nearby a national park has actually been just outside of it. Like for example, when we were in Grand Teton, just to the east, and you could look out onto the Tetons, was completely free camping inside of a national forest. This next tip is going to sound pretty obvious, but you're going to want to check out the website of each national park before you visit.
There is tons of great information, and this is a great resource to start to plan out your national park trip. Every website has the national park map that you can download, so you can plan out your route, research hikes, and there's even a calendar for ranger-led programs. And these are some of our favorite things to do when we're in the parks. It just gives you a much deeper look and understanding of some of the places that you're visiting. And again, don't get discouraged if you go to check the calendar and there isn't something listed. Sometimes these are updated a week or 2 weeks in advance based upon ranger availability. So make sure you're checking back the sooner it is to your trip.
And whether you have a computer or not, it's a great idea to also download the official National Park Service app. You can save in offline mode any of the national parks, including all of the things that we've just described. Park maps, schedule of events, and must-do activities are all going to be on the app as well, and you can save them for offline, so that way, even when you're in the national park and there's no cell service, you still have the information at your fingertips. Our next tip is to watch videos and to check out park-specific guides by people like us.
We're making a dedicated episode for each national park that we visit this year, and that includes planning tips and our favorite things to do and where to stay.
We'll also have more of our popular planning guides available to more destinations like the U.S. national parks we're visiting, as well as combination routes that you can take in a specific state or region to visit multiple parks at once.
Okay, so you've done all the hard pre-planning and research, you have arrived at the national park, and the very first thing that we recommend doing is visiting the visitor center.
What a surprise! Because you're going to meet the rangers, and the rangers of the national parks are going to be full of great ideas. If you tell them how many are in your party, whether you have adults and children, maybe just adults, maybe your physical abilities, how long you're going to be staying in the national park, they will give you their best recommendations and their favorite spots to visit when you're in the national park.
And they also have the most up-to-date information on weather conditions, trail closures, wildlife activity, and this is really important information before you head out on a hike or a trail so that you have the most current conditions.
And while you're in the visitor center, get that stamp. It's free. A lot of people like us have the passport books, but you don't even need to use that. In fact, you can actually stamp anything you'd like. I've seen people get the free park map, stamp it, so that way they have a date stamp that shows the date that they visited the national park. What a cool free souvenir. There are literally javelinas outside our door right now. Speaking of wildlife, it is the wild. And if you get too focused on a very precise schedule, things are going to change, things are going to happen, maybe weather, wild animals. We've been in some parks where you literally have to stop driving because animals are crossing the road continuously. You need to have flexibility in your plan.
And even if you have visited a national park before, that doesn't mean that you've seen it all, and you can have different experiences every time you go. Take Everglades, for example. When we went the first time, we didn't go to the completely other area of the park, Shark Valley, and that was such an amazing experience. So just remember that these national parks have so much incredible ground to cover that you're probably not going to be able to see and do it all. This next part is very important for those of us who travel with our furry family members. Most national parks are not dog friendly, except for campgrounds or certain trails and the visitor center. And the big reason for that is because of wildlife, to protect them from each other. It's just a safer situation for everybody involved. And there are some trails that are dog friendly. Cascades National Park, there was a beautiful trail where we could take the dogs, and we were so excited to do that. So just again, ask the rangers or check the park maps, and they will be clearly labeled as dog friendly if you're able to do that. Grand Canyon is another one where you can take the dogs around the rim trail, and that was really fun and a great photo op.
And if you bring your dogs, many of them now have a Bark Ranger program where they can get sworn in, kind of like the Junior Ranger program, but for your dogs. Now, you're supposed to read a series of instructions to your dog most of the time, so that way they can be sworn in. I want to trust and believe that Piper, Ella, and Scout do understand what we're saying as we're laying out the instructions and the rules of a given national park.
Right, because you want your dogs to be good stewards of the national parks. And these are just some of our tips and tricks, but we want to hear your ideas for planning national park visits, so drop them in the comments below.
And to follow along our adventure, visit our dedicated website, newstatenomads.com/nationalparks.
Thanks for watching.
See ya.